ado, please welcome Professor Maria Fasli, who's going to talk to us about the way in which she got where she is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone. My name is Maria Fasli. I'm an academic in the School of Computer Science and Electronic Engineering. I am an academic in the school, but I'm not teaching in the school because I'm currently seconded to a different role within the university. So I've been asked to deliver a talk on my career, if you like. So this is not going to be a technical talk, but what I'll try and do is just tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am. And some things may shock you, some things may sound bizarre, but you need to appreciate that I'm really old, though I may not look like it, I hope. I've been around in this place for a very, very long time. I'm part of the furniture, literally. If you were to move the university, you would have to move me as well. I've been around for that long time. So things have changed considerably since I've started working here. So I was asked for a title, and I came up with Me, Myself, and I, because I'm talking about me, a very personal journey. The alternative title that I thought was how perhaps to go about, or not to go about, your career, being an academic, or not an academic career. So you take it with a pinch of salt, maybe quite a lot, and you can extract your own conclusions from this talk. What this talk is not about. So I'm not going to tell you how you can change yourselves, how you can achieve success. I cannot even define success, not even for me, or how you can be someone else. Okay, so if you've come in so that I can teach you any of this, wrong class, wrong lecture. What this is about. It's about a very personal journey, what has worked and what has not worked for me, and I'm still learning, I'm still trialing things out, I'm failing, I'm coming back up again, hopefully, and some of the trials and tribulations that I have had to go through. So, can I ask you, as part of my next slide, what did you want to become? You know, from as young as you can remember yourselves, or perhaps when you were at the end of primary school, going into secondary school, what did you want to become? And is this now what you are doing? No. Okay. For various reasons. So, I can tell you that what I'm doing today, my role as an academic, this was not my first career choice. I didn't want to be essentially an academic, a teacher. I'm just exaggerating, right? So there are a lot of generalizations and exaggerations in this talk. I didn't want to be a boring academic, boring my students perhaps. This is not what I had in mind for myself. I wanted to become something completely different. So this might be the first shock. So, Tom Cruise. I did not want to become Tom Cruise. This is, does anyone recognize this photo? Yeah. This is from Top Gun. This is an old movie, or an older movie. Some of you young people may have never watched it, but it's good fun. I would recommend watching it. So what I wanted to become was a fighter pilot, because that's the role that he plays in this. So hopefully the video is going to work. This was fun. So that's what I wanted to be, and not a commercial airline pilot, a fighter pilot, as in for the Greek army. I'm Greek by origin, by the way. So this was a true goal. I kid you not, at the age of 12, I had decided that this is what I wanted to do in life, but my plans were thwarted because of 3 S's that got in the way. And the first S was I'm short-sighted, and in the Greek army they would not accept people with any eye defects, so I could have laser surgery, but they could detect it apparently, so that was a no-no. Why? I have no idea. The second S was apparently I'm short. It was news to me because my legs still touch the floor, as one of my favorite minions says. And I ask you to consider why on earth would you want a tall person in a cockpit which is really tiny. I'm small, I can fit anywhere. You know, I'm the right size, but no, they wouldn't have any of it. In fact, I needed to be something like 25 centimeters taller, so there was no way, no matter how you would attempt to stretch me, you wouldn't. And the third S was apparently I was the wrong sex at the time. So there was a stipulation that to be an officer and fly, as in fighter pilot, you had to be a man. So that killed it for me, so I started looking at alternatives. And I had quite an interesting journey throughout my life, so this is what I'm going to tell you. So I want you to think the question, I've been wondering about this, and I will keep wondering about this for years, I think, whether some things we do are nature or nurture. So are we born with certain traits and characteristics that lead us to do things, or is it our environment that essentially make us who we are, or is it a combination of the two? So I have not answered that question yet. It's still open. But for me, it's quite an interesting question, and I would like someone to answer it for me. If it's my genes that lead me to do things, I would like to know. So just a little bit so that you can understand the context and how I got to where I am. In my life, I've been very privileged. I've had a very loving family, but I come from a really poor background, a really, really poor background. I had a very encouraging father who was passionate himself about education, but he was stopped by his own parents from going into high school. So essentially, he just finished primary school and he was taken out of school for a number of reasons. So he never had the education that he really craved for. And as a parent, he wanted his children to grow up and educate themselves because he was seeing this as the only way to lift yourself out of poverty. My family, as I said, quite a poor background, but very traditional family. And it played a major role in shaping some of my views. I'm the first child of what we would call in Greek the extended family. So I'm the oldest child the first child that was born among my father's siblings. And I was expected to be a boy. So the fact that I was a girl was quite disappointing to my grandparents. Not that they didn't love me, they did, and I loved them, and I don't hold it against them, but there was, and maybe there still is in Greece, this, the first child needs to be a boy, because it's the boy that passes the name down, so if you're a girl, man, we don't care that much, we're just waiting for the boy to be born. So you may be wondering how is that had any impact on you? Well, it had a major impact. My brother, well, as you can imagine, he's boy. He was born 2 years after me, and I felt discriminated against from a really young age. And just to give you an example, and again, no ill feelings towards my grandparents, I love them, but because of the way Greek society works, and they wanted a boy, so the minute the boy gets born, I suddenly take, I think from the start, second place. But even in the language that they were using, there was discrimination there. So in Greek, you have the word for boy, girl, as you do in English, and you have the word for child. So when my grandparents were asked, how many children does your son have, about my father, they would respond, and I quote, but I translate in English, he has 1 child and 1 girl. So my brother was the child, I was the girl. And not just that, but it was reversed. So instead of saying he's got a girl and he's got a boy, or he's got 2 children, no, the boy comes first, and it's a child, whereas you're not even a child. What are you? I don't know. So from a very young age, I don't know why, but this bugged me. It really did. I only understood why years later, but it just goes to show that we can display discrimination or a bias even when we use very simple language. For my grandparents, it was very, it was how they expressed themselves. That's why I said I'm not holding it against them in any way, but that's how things are. And unless we change our own language and attitudes, we're not going to see progress in relation to women and where we stand in society. So that's the kind of background that I had. Now, my father was completely different. He would, instead of saying, okay, I've got a boy, and I've got a child, and I've got, that's my email, oh my gosh, you will hear all the emails arriving now. He would say, I've got 2 children, I've got a girl and a boy, and he was really proud of me. He wanted me to achieve, so I had a lot of encouragement from home, massive encouragement. In fact, my dad would turn around and he would say, why are you scared of? You're just going to have to try as boys do. So that taught me some lessons. And if you keep hearing the same thing from a young age, it's fascinating. And I go back to the question, nature versus nurture. How things stick in your brain, and then people cannot change your views when they turn around suddenly 20 years down the line and they're telling you, you cannot be doing this because you're a woman. Because your young years you spent listening to a completely different message. So this is really important. School I loved. I loved being at school. I have a very good memory. Back then, my memory was even better. I didn't even have to study a lot because I would remember the lessons being delivered to my teacher, so I really loved it. When I think about it and I try to distill what is it that has been guiding me, it's some actually quite simple principles. So just because I'm a girl, it doesn't mean that I cannot do things. I will try things that boys will, even when I was younger. If you believe you want something, you go and ask for it, you fight for it. You just don't let it go. Nobody's going to give it to you. You have to ask for it. My father used to say, unless you ask, you're not going to get. And if you ask, what's the worst outcome? People say no, and that's it. You're prepared for it, you try again. And the final principle is education, education, education. And we're all at the university, and the role of the university is to equip young people with the right skills and to go out and progress in their lives. So this is the kind of message that I had from my family. One thing you need to understand about me, and there are some people in the audience that work closely with me, is I don't look at problems necessarily as other people look at problems, and this has helped me a lot in my life. When people talk about problems, I see challenges. So I look at the problem and I think, what can I do about it? I may not have the solution immediately, it may come, it may materialize later on. And I like to break down things into smaller bits that I can address, and then I can synthesize solutions, more or less like a programmer. And I was trained like that when I went to school. So why do I do things? I have something called intrinsic motivation. I had this as a child from a really young age. So nobody ever told me, you need to go and do your homework. Nobody. I would do my own homework. My parents couldn't help me because they were not educated, but nobody had to tell me how to do things. If I want to do something, I do it because I feel internally motivated. The roles that I take on is because I want to take them on, is because I see challenges, they offer me new things that I can learn, and this is a constant need that I have, to be learning things and to be challenged, not to stay stagnant. I like to move on, I like to be doing things. I like solving problems, I mentioned this. I'm a planner. My husband says, even when I don't do something, it's because I have a plan, not to have a plan to do something. But my plans are flexible. So as I go through my life or my everyday, I'm aware that things will oscillate and I may have to divert my attention, and this is really important in life. But I'm also a completer finisher. I've done this now a few times. There's something called Belbin profiles, and so you do an exercise and someone is telling you what kind of role you are good at. I'm a completer finisher, which means I like to complete things. I cannot have things half finished. I just can't. It has to be finished. Even if it's not perfect, I need to complete something. And when I don't complete things, I don't feel very good. I love working with people and helping people when I can. I hope this comes across for those that work with me. One thing that drives me, even unconsciously, is this need for financial security. Coming from a really poor background and not having a safety net, I never had a safety net in my life. I need to be financially secure. I need to be earning my own keep. I need to depend on myself. Other people can depend on me, I don't mind that, but I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I have quite a strong moral compass. I have a very strong sense. I've been told this even when I was at a really young age, a very strong sense of what's right and wrong and this notion of fairness. And I cannot stand it when there's unfairness. This has not always served me well because you pick up battles. And sometimes when you are operating within a large organizational context, you pick up battles because you think something is unfair, but organizations work in specific ways and you may end up losing. So that's why I said this has not always served me right. I do have a sense of duty. I'm very loyal, that's why I have been around in this university for such a long time. And I like to contribute. I cannot go my day-to-day life or my job without giving something. Giving to people, giving to my employer, so that's how I am. You may be thinking, what on earth? But that's how I am. So if you're dealing with me, these are things you need to be aware of. As I said, very informal talk. So BC, before what people would call career. So when I realized that I could not be a fighter pilot, I had to find something else. I had a natural tendency for sciences. I loved maths, physics, chemistry, that sort of thing. And I looked around at the things that I could do. I wanted to become a mathematician for a start, as a second choice career. But then I realized that the only sort of career choice, at least at the time, would have been to go and teach in a secondary or tertiary education in Greece. And just that didn't appeal to me. For a start. At the same time, that was ages ago, right? My uncle, my mother's brother, got his first computer, and it was with a tape. Okay, so we were running basic programs that were recorded on a tape. I kid you not, and he taught me a basic programming language. So I came across computers, I came across programming. So that's how I got interested. And then at the time in Greece, you could go into more of a technical kind of education. So that's what I decided to do because it's quite complicated. I can give you details if you're interested. But essentially, it enabled me at a very young age, by the age of 18, I would have had essentially a technical degree that would enable me to work as a computer programmer for companies. So when I was between 18 and 19, when I was doing that, as part of my certificate in education, at the age of 19, I was in classes actually delivering lectures and being judged on them by professionals who were, double my age, some of them three times my age, so very experienced people. And I loved teaching, so I thought, if everything else fails, I can become a teacher at the end of it. Remember what I told you, this was not my first career choice. I just loved teaching. So that's how I was first exposed. So after my first year, in my second and third years, I actually had to work almost full-time, or the equivalent of full-time, in order to be able to support myself, because there was nothing that could have been given to me as support from home. I mean, nothing. So at the time I was working between 20 and 25 contact hours. So I was teaching this many hours. In Greece, if you want to learn a foreign language, you usually go to private school. We have a special name for them, but that's how you learn a foreign language. You don't typically learn it at home, at school. So I was teaching people, I was 20, I was teaching people children from the age of 6, 7, to adults 40, 45, and in fact my employer had to lie about my age because people were wondering how old I am, and we had to tell them at the time when I was 20 that was 25, so it didn't look as if they had a youngster teaching them, some of them at least, but I had to survive doing that. So then I got a scholarship actually and went to Leeds, so that's how I came to the UK for the first time. So I've been constantly multitasking since that age and even before that. And when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I loved it. I had one regret. I just didn't have the time that I wanted to devote to studying and delivering, my assignments and getting the best grades. I still got a good grade, but it's not good enough for me if you ask me personally. So this lack of time is a regret. This lack of, your undergraduates, if this is all you're doing or you're doing another degree, use this time at uni. It's precious. So, in any case, I then got in the UK, having got a scholarship through exams, so it wasn't offered to me like that. And for my PhD, having got now almost like a developer's mentality, a problem solver, kind of, give me a problem, I'll break it down, I'll deliver it, and you'll get the outcome, you'll get the result. I thought if I'm doing a PhD, then I need to be more of an academic, so the kind of topic that I'm going to choose has to be formal. So I decided to move away from development and software engineering and this sort of thing to something a lot more abstract. So I decided to do my PhD in logic, of all things, that I never had much of a background. So that was a bit of a struggle. And I remember my PhD supervisor, he gave me a book when I arrived. It was Logics of Common Sense Reasoning, or Common Sense Reasoning, and it had, I can't remember, 15, 16 chapters, and every chapter would describe logical approaches to a specific domain. So logical approaches for temporal reasoning, so how to reason with time. And he said to me at the time, I don't care which area you're going to choose, I just don't want you to choose logics of knowledge and belief. Just not that. Anything else from this book as a domain, just not that. So guess what I chose? It was as if he was saying to me, this is what you need to do. I was just intrigued, but it was fascinating. Because my PhD is on how you can describe intelligent systems in terms of having characteristics like beliefs, desires, knowledge, so it's quite complex. Then you enter into paradoxes, so it's quite interesting, but it took me an awful long time to get around to this level of abstraction where you don't think of a system in terms of having variables. So then I became an academic. And how did I become an academic? As I was about to finish my PhD studies, my supervisor said to me, there's a couple of openings in the then Department of Computer Science, and you will be looking for a job. I was running out of funding. Why don't you apply? And if you get shortlisted, at least you're going to get an interview, and people are not going to be aggressive because they know you, they know that you're a PhD student. So I applied, I got shortlisted, I got the interview. I cannot say that they were not aggressive. They grilled me, they really grilled me, but that was practice. And I got offered the job. So that's how I ended up being an academic. So that was, and now I'm going to have to reveal my age by what I say, I'm sorry. So that was in 2000 when I started being an academic here. So I'm very naive at that stage. I have no idea how academia works, very little. I do have that. I can be quite naive at times. So I had a view of myself and how my career could potentially progress. So I had a rough plan in my head. So I'm gonna show you what the plan was. So I thought, okay, 2000, how many years do I need to work? I need to work for about 35, 40 years, so let's get a plan out. So I thought, what do I do? Obviously, you go like that, or that's what I thought. So I would be building up my research and my teaching for a start. Then I would be applying, I was employed as a lecturer. For promotion to senior lecturer, I was anticipating this to be about 2013. I thought you need a good 12, 13, maybe 15 years to get to that stage where you apply. Then I would continue to build my research if I were to be promoted, with the aim being potentially to apply to become a prof by about 2025 to 2030. So, because you need a few years to build your research, right? It doesn't happen from one day to another. And then I thought, as I'm approaching retirement and I'm mature enough, perhaps I can go for a management role within the university, maybe a head of school. So that was my plan. And it didn't exactly pan out this way, as you will see. It turned out quite different. So this is what happened. So I started as a lecturer. My first task was to develop a new module called Agent Technology for E-commerce. There is one person in this room who actually attended that module. I'm not going to point fingers. Remember the first slide which said this is not my first career choice? I loved teaching, so I wanted to do this properly. So I designed all the materials, I came up with ideas of how we could do things. And my students at the time, so this is about intelligent systems being able to operate in electronic commerce environments. So negotiating as part of auctions, for instance, various things. So we developed a server with a PhD student of mine, and we could build games, as in electronic market games, and the students would write software, and they would be competing against each other, and then we would run competitions internally, and it was great fun, at least for me. Was it for others? Yeah, it was. So I call this the formative years. So as I'm naive, I don't know how academia works. Back then I was in the Department of Computer Science, so that's why I said this is a long way back. And when I joined, there were 3 other women. By about 2002, 2003, I think I was about, or by 2005, definitely, I was the only woman. The only woman at the lecture level in the computer science department, going about being a happy bunny, delivering her teaching. So, because I loved what I was doing with my students so much, I got in touch with what is now known the Learning and Development Unit. I got projects to develop software, and that's another email. At the time, I was asked to put myself forward for a national award to recognize my innovations in learning and teaching, which is called the National Teaching Fellowship. So the university can put you forward for one of these, and you go into a UK kind of competition with external reviewers, etc. So I went in the first time, I didn't get it, I think that was in 2004. But I got one of these in 2005. And it was quite a major achievement because nobody else had it at the time within the university. I felt quite proud because I loved it. It was a recognition of all the effort that I had put into my teaching. So by that time I had developed quite a bit of my research. I was not part of a research group, I was on my own. So I thought maybe I should try for promotion a bit earlier than my 2013-2015 plan. So I tried for promotion. Very different criteria, very different system, very different processes. At the time, the department had to essentially put you forward, so you were competing internally against your colleagues. The senior staff, so this is senior lecturers, readers, professors, come together, they look at all the applications and they decide who they're gonna move forward. So the first time I put myself forward, I get the slap, and I'm being told you're not ready yet, you don't have enough research. And I thought, okay, so I've done my teaching, now I need to build my research. So I worked really hard for a year to develop my research, get more publications. I go, now, I have a national teaching fellowship. No one has this in the uni. I'm the only one, national recognition, so this surely must count for something. Second time for promotion through same processes, I get another slap. And this time, I'm being told more or less, Maria, you need to learn to play the game. And what? What do you mean? Teaching, why are you investing your time in all these education initiatives? Very different time. Okay, don't forget about today, very different time. A long time ago. Why? You could be submitting grant applications, you don't have a grant application, yeah, but I'm working on my own, I don't belong in a research group. No. You need to learn the game, to play the game. So this is the second time. I go back, I discuss this with my husband, I'm really frustrated, and I'm thinking, I cannot be that bad. Surely the people that are, because I knew the colleagues that they were putting forward, and I checked their profiles. I said, there's no way I'm any less than them. But what had happened was, because I'm not a member of the group in a group at the time, there are always these political kind of decisions that are being taken at the time on who was going to be put forward. And if you don't belong to a little group, nobody fights your corner. You have individuals fighting your corner, but you don't have necessarily a group voice. So I'm really frustrated. I check the rules, I'm a stickler to rules and procedures and processes, and I realized that I can make a case, but that would involve me going against my entire academic department, all the senior staff. I would have to go outside the normal process, submit a case to the chair at the time of the academic staffing committee that was considering the applications for promotion, make a case that prima facie I'm as good as the applicants that were put forward by my department, and if this person was to judge that I had a case, then my application could be put in that round. So that's what I did. I knew what I was coming up against, and some of my colleagues that wanted to support me had warned me that I would be up against essentially an entire all-male senior staffing committee and telling them, I'm going against you if that was to go through, and they knew what I was doing. So the chair looks at the application and accepts that there's a prima facie case, and my case is as good as the other people that have been put forward by the department. Guess what happens next? So 3 cases at the time went in from my department and myself. And because of the way that my case was constructed, the senior committee within the university, so external people, essentially could tell that I was going up against my entire academic department. So, someone could be cynic and say, Maria, they must have stopped you at the time. No, they looked at all the cases, and actually I got promoted to senior lecturer and nobody else did from the school. So, sometimes it's worth fighting. And when I was told that, my jaw was on the floor. I didn't expect to get it. But when I realized that I had got it and nobody else had, can you imagine, the relief? But can you imagine how my colleagues felt, being senior academics and being told that actually they had done something wrong. They had not followed the rules, and they didn't do it properly, and they should not have sidelined me. So there you have it. So I got promoted earlier than I had done my plan. So that was the dark ages that I described, me being disillusioned after I did not get through the first time. So I got promoted in 2007, 2008, and then I continued obviously being a senior lecturer. And in 2007, computer science and electronic engineering as 2 individual academic departments merged. We had a first head, and I was asked to be the second head of the new school, the School of Computer Science and Electronic Engineering. We still talk years ago, so that's 2009. Now, I got promoted in 2007, 2008. In 2009, if you're asked to be head of a school which also includes your senior colleagues that had essentially stopped your promotion, just imagine the situation for a minute. So on the one hand, I've got colleagues that I had gone against, and on the other, my colleagues in electronic systems engineering, they didn't know me. All they knew about me was a name. Okay, so it was quite an interesting period, and I'll come back to that. But so that's when I became head. So instead of becoming having this senior or management role at the age of probably 60, I got it a lot earlier in my life. So my plan has been completely thrown into disarray. So I'm not sure where to go next. So then I got promoted to professor in 2012, way earlier than the 2025 that I was expecting. And then in 2014, I took on my current role as director of the Institute for Analytics and Data Science, which is a pan-university institute. And then in 2016, I got my UNESCO chair. And next year, in 2019, in August, I will become the executive dean of the Faculty of Science and Health. So the plan didn't work as intended for a start. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about my time as head of school, because this has been very interesting. So this is what I looked like at the time. Very young, very fresh, not a lot of stress, or as much as I have now perhaps at the time. And I think, remember the context. So I'm taking over a new school. What you don't know at the time, because a lot of you are new, is that computer science and electronic engineering was in a massive deficit of £3 million. That's the deficit that I had when I took over as head of school. You had two different disciplines coming together, and anyone you talk to that has been through mergers, they will tell you mergers, they typically don't work. Unless you know what you're doing, and you may be wondering, did you really know what you were doing at the time? They don't work. Because you may have conflicting cultures coming up against each other, and it may be very tricky to make people work together. And it's not easy to make people be nice to each other. So I had a deficit, I had colleagues that didn't like each other, some of them didn't like the merger at all. This was ages ago, right? So there I was, being the head of this school now. And I think a lot of people, some of my own colleagues, people within the university, when they were to meet me for the first time perhaps, or even after a few times, instead of seeing that, they were seeing this. So they were seeing a little girl, because that's what some of them perceived me to be, perhaps not a little girl, maybe a little woman, being in this position of power. But how do you trust a woman to do a job that involves decision making? A parenthesis here, one of the reasons why the Greek army at the time didn't want to have female fighter pilots is apparently because women cannot make fast decisions. And we're not good at making decisions. I would dispute that. So this is what some people were seeing at the time. It was quite stressful for me, because obviously you have you went against your department, and then you have a situation where you don't have a happy department, but you have to bring people together. It's not easy to deal with. But what people didn't realize at the time, oh no, don't do this. So instead of, it's poor animation, instead of this, what people had to deal with at times was this. My husband used to say, it's like you're a Terminator, or the Commando. Have you seen this movie? He kills about 200 people within 2 minutes. It's amazing. Perhaps I should have printed a t-shirt at the time to say, actually, you may think I look like this, but do consider me being like that, or approach at your own risk, or something like this. So it was interesting times. At times I had to take on this role. Gandalf, do you know Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, wise man and the hobbits? So this is from a scene from the Fellowship of the Rings, I think, where he stops Balrog, you know, the demon. So on the one hand, I had to play the wise one, despite what they thought they were looking at, which was the little girl or the little child image. And I had to take the role of being the one who was the wise one, the grey one, or the white one, or the yellow one. And because your role as head of school is to essentially protect your department, my role was actually to have this kind of protective armor when I was in meetings and people were trying to get things off CSE or they were trying to push policies. So it was quite an interesting role to have. So it took me a few good years, and at the time I had 3 objectives as head of school: to bring the department together. So I wanted us to be a school that felt like one. So no more electronic systems engineering or computer science, but CSE. And I wanted them to feel allegiance to CSE. I wanted us to be in the black, so I wanted at some point, my term was 3 years, maybe by, if I was to do a second term, to get the department into black, so out of the financial difficulties. And the third one was to maintain our research position and build a good research base so that the school can be lifted. Because I kept walking around telling everyone, people were telling me that I have the basket case department as head of school, and I kept telling them, CSE will come around and it will be the #1 recruiting department in the university. You just wait and see. It's going to happen, and it has happened. It took me a while to make them smile. So this is a photo of an away day of ours. You cannot see it very clearly, but what you see is me, the only woman in the department, among my lovely colleagues. And they're all smiling, because I told them you have to smile, otherwise you'll stand in these steps for a long time until we get the right picture. No, I'm joking. But they did get to smile. I mean, we are amazing now. If you look at our metrics and the things that we are doing, here's another photo of us. So it's been amazing. And now I'm in this role of the Institute for Analytics and Data Science, which when I started was essentially a title, the title of me as the director of the institute, and it was built from the bottom up. So I had a budget, I got an administrator, then the vice chancellor in the university started giving me support for staff, so we now have staff in the institute, and here's a lovely photo of us. I told everyone, or Saba told everyone, to wear Christmas jumpers. Not many people did. I think it was just Saba and me. So, for those of you who are part of IADS, this Christmas you're wearing a Christmas jumper. So very different challenges facing in my current role. Interfacing with colleagues within the university, but also having more of an external facing role. So I talk a lot to companies, different types of organizations. With my UNESCO chair is all about supporting the development of skills and building research capacity in different countries in the world, with an emphasis being in developing countries. So it's been fun so far. But it's been an unexpected journey, so maybe that's another title for a talk in the future. So me, myself, and I, an unexpected journey. So there's this image here of a glass ceiling, because we very often talk about women facing a glass ceiling. I've never seen it like that, in the sense that I don't care what people think about me and what I can do and what I cannot do. If I want to do something, I'm going to try for it. Sometimes I will face obstacles. I'm willing to put in a lot of hard work and effort to overcome them. But I feel we need, all of us, and I'm talking to our female audience, we need to aspire more. We need to be stronger within ourselves. So I learned a lot of lessons, and these are my own lessons, and I try to keep these to myself, in the sense that telling them to me not on a daily basis, so I don't sit in front of a mirror and I keep telling these lessons to myself, but once in a while you have to do it. And you have to do it because we women can suffer from what's called the imposter syndrome. Have you heard of this before? So when I became head of school, very often I would wake up in the morning, I would look myself in the mirror, and I would burst into a hysterical laughter. Because I could not believe it that I was a head of an academic department in a university. Just felt surreal. And then I would come into the office and I would just continue my day. But there were these moments when you start doubting yourself and you look yourself in the mirror and you think, can I really do this? Yeah, you can. If you see it as a job and not as having a glass ceiling, I think we all can. But we do suffer. And there's evidence, a lot of evidence, that women suffer a lot more than men. In fact, men, they take it in their stride. No disrespect to my male colleagues here in this room, but they just have more confidence. Again, the nurture versus nature question comes in mind. Is it in the genes? Is it the way we are being brought up? So I need to accept that I'm valuable myself, which means I need to look after myself. And this is really a hard lesson, and I cannot, in all honesty, say that I have learned it very well, because the first person that I will put aside will be myself. If someone asks me to do something, even though I have allocated the time for myself, I will try and help do this other thing rather than keep the time for myself. So I need to learn. I like to stay true to my own principles and values. So where I feel there's unfairness, I just cannot stand it. And as I said, I've been in battles. Some of them I described has served me well or not. Keep something for you. I have kept something for me. And people that know me and have worked with me, they know that there are specific days in the week when I go to the gym and I do very specific sessions. And please, this time is mine. Don't touch it. No matter what you want me to do, please leave this time for me, because this is my time. No matter what is going on, what problems are hitting me, if the sky is about to fall on our head, I need this time, because this is the time when I unwind and endorphins start rushing through my bloodstream, and I feel well for myself, and I'm ready for the next battle. Don't let anyone tell you that you cannot do things because you're a woman. And this is the message that I had since I was a child. So it's very difficult for anyone at this age, especially, to undo this kind of message that I have got. This has helped me a lot. I have not learned to say no. I keep telling myself in the mirror, you need to learn to say no. I've tried, I can do it at times, but not always. And stand up for things that are worth fighting. Sometimes you have to pick your battles, but I think it's worth fighting for the things that you really believe in. So final thoughts. True inspiration comes from believing in something passionately yourself and communicating that belief to others. I'm not sure if this is a quote. This, I think, expresses how I feel about things. I felt passionate about CSE at the time. I feel passionate about IADS. I feel passionate about this university. So I'm not entirely sure that I always am able to communicate this message clearly, but I like what I do. I enjoy. I try to be authentic. Obviously, if I'm upset, I will try and hide it and be professional. This is different to being authentic, but I think you need to be yourself, because if you lose yourself, then I'm not sure it's worth it. And there's a very nice quote from Oscar Wilde. I hope I'm quoting this right. Be yourself, everyone else is already taken. One thing that has served me well, maybe again it's nature, is I'm not competing against anyone else. I'm not competing against any other academic in CSE or within the university. I want to do things for me. If I'm happy, I'm happy. I'm okay. So when I was doing all the things with my students, even when people were telling me I'm doing the wrong thing, I believed in it. I was happy, my students were happy. So, I don't compete with others. And essentially that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has been to some extent informative, or you got some messages. So thank you very much.